The fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport hummed overhead as Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood near Gate C-14, her eyes scanning the flow of travelers with practiced efficiency. Beside her, K9 Max sat at attention, his dark eyes alert, ears swiveling to catch every sound in the bustling terminal. The afternoon shift had been routine. 2 baggage inspections, 1 suspicious passenger who turned out to be nervous about flying, and endless waves of humanity pushing through Atlanta's busiest gateway to the world. Sarah adjusted her duty belt and checked her watch. 20 minutes until their next sweep. Max's tail gave a single thump against the polished floor, his way of saying he was ready for whatever came next. That's when she saw him. An older man, maybe 60, stood near the airline counter with a Belgian shepherd that looked nearly as weathered as he did. The dog's muzzle was graying, his stance still proud, but with the slight stiffness of age in his hindquarters. The man knelt down, his hands trembling as they ran through the shepherd's thick coat. Even from 30 feet away, Sarah could see his shoulders shaking. Max noticed too. His ears pricked forward, head tilting slightly as he observed the scene. The man pressed his forehead against the dog's, whispering something Sarah couldn't hear. The shepherd's tail wagged slowly, uncertainly, as if sensing something was wrong. An airline employee approached with a travel crate, the kind used for live animal cargo. The man stood, his face wet with tears, and tried to guide the dog toward the crate. The shepherd planted his feet. "Come on, boy," the man's voice cracked, audible now across the gate area. "You have to go. It's the only way." The dog whined, a low, mournful sound that cut through the ambient noise of the terminal. Travelers nearby stopped, watching the scene unfold. Some pulled out phones, others simply stared, uncomfortable witnesses to private grief made public. Sarah felt Max shift beside her, a soft whine building in his throat. She rested her hand on his head. "I know, buddy, I know." The airline employee, a young woman with her hair in a tight bun, knelt beside the shepherd, her voice professional but kind. "Sir, we need to get him secured for the flight. The cargo hold is temperature-controlled and pressurized. He'll be safe." The man nodded, unable to speak. He removed the dog's collar, a worn leather strip with a simple metal tag, and pressed it into his palm like a talisman. The shepherd looked up at him, brown eyes full of questions that would never be answered. With the employee's help, they finally coaxed the dog into the crate. The shepherd turned circles inside the confined space, his anxiety palpable. The man knelt again, fingers thrust through the metal grate. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The employee sealed the crate and attached the necessary documentation. "He'll be in good hands, sir. Flight 447 to Seattle departs in 45 minutes. Your family will pick him up on the other end." The man didn't respond. He just watched as they wheeled the crate away toward the service elevator that led to the cargo handling area. The shepherd's face remained pressed against the grate, eyes locked on his owner until the very last second before the elevator doors closed. Sarah watched the man stand there, frozen, staring at the closed elevator doors as if willing them to open again. His hands hung at his sides, the collar still clutched in one fist. After a long moment, he turned and walked toward the main terminal exit, his gait unsteady. "That was hard to watch," Sarah muttered to Max. She'd seen plenty of emotional goodbyes at airports, soldiers deploying, families separating, last visits before someone moved away forever. But something about this felt different, heavier. Max whined again, his gaze following the direction the crate had gone. "Come on," Sarah said, checking her radio. "We've got Sector B to sweep before shift change." They were halfway across the concourse when the screaming started. Sarah's hand went to her sidearm instinctively as she spun toward the sound. Near Gate C-14, the same area where the dog had been taken away, a cluster of airline employees was backing away from something. One woman had her hands over her mouth. A man in a TSA uniform was already on his radio, his voice urgent but controlled. All units, we have a situation at gate C14. Possible escaped animal. Repeat, escaped animal in the terminal. Sarah broke into a run, Max keeping pace beside her. They covered the distance in seconds. As they pushed through the gathering crowd, Sarah saw him. The Belgian shepherd stood in the middle of the concourse, his crate overturned 20 feet away near the elevator bank. His chest heaved with exertion, fur standing up along his spine, but he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't looking for an escape route. He was staring at a black rolling suitcase sitting abandoned near a row of seats, and he was barking. Not the playful bark of a happy dog, not the warning bark of a protective animal. This was something else entirely, desperate, insistent, almost frantic. The shepherd took 2 steps toward the suitcase, then backed up, then advanced again, his barks echoing off the high ceiling of the terminal. Jesus, one of the airline employees breathed. How did he get out? Sarah moved carefully toward the dog, her posture low and non-threatening. Max stayed close but gave the shepherd space, reading the other dog's body language with the expertise of a trained K9. "Easy, boy," Sarah said softly. "Easy." The shepherd glanced at her, then immediately returned his attention to the suitcase. His barking intensified. Foam flecked his muzzle. His front paws dug at the carpet as if he wanted to drag the luggage toward him. Sarah keyed her radio. "This is Lieutenant Collins, K9 unit. I need TSA and a bomb tech at gate C14 immediately. We have a dog alerting to an unattended bag." Static crackled. "Copy that, Collins. Units en route. What's the dog's behavior?" Sarah studied the shepherd. His ears were forward, tail straight out behind him. Classic alert posture. But there was something else. Something almost human in the way he looked at that suitcase. Recognition. "He's fixated," Sarah reported. "Extremely agitated but not showing aggression. Possible detection alert." More TSA agents arrived, establishing a perimeter. An announcement crackled over the PA system, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are temporarily suspending boarding for all flights in Concourse C. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of airport personnel." The crowd that had been watching began to disperse, urged back by uniformed officers. But Sarah noticed something. She looked around, scanning faces, then keyed her radio again. "Anyone have eyes on the owner of this dog? Middle-aged man, 6 feet tall, grey hair, left the area approximately 10 minutes ago." "Negative," came the response. "Want us to check security footage?" "Do it." Sarah moved closer to the suitcase, keeping her movements slow. The shepherd watched her but didn't stop barking. Max moved up beside her, his nose working the air. After a moment he sat, his passive alert signal. Sarah's blood went cold. Max had detected something too. The bomb tech arrived, a stocky man named Rodriguez who Sarah had worked with before. He assessed the situation quickly, then looked at Sarah. 2 dogs alerting. 2 dogs, Sarah confirmed, but this one isn't trained. He's civilian. And he's not alerting to explosives. "How do you know?" Sarah pointed to the shepherd's posture. "He wants to get to the bag, not away from it. And look at his eyes. That's not fear. That's concern." Rodriguez pulled out his portable X-ray scanner, a device that looked like an oversized tablet. He approached the suitcase carefully, the shepherd's barking reaching a fever pitch as he got closer. The dog lunged forward, and Sarah had to physically block him with her body. "Easy, boy. Let him work." The scanner hummed as Rodriguez swept it over the luggage. After a moment he lowered the device, his expression confused. "No explosives, no weapons, no liquids over regulation size. It's clean." Then what the hell is he barking at?" Sarah muttered. Another TSA agent jogged up, slightly out of breath. "Lieutenant, we checked the footage. The man who owned this dog, we have him on camera entering the terminal with that suitcase. He checked in at the counter, then took the dog through this whole goodbye ritual. The suitcase has been sitting here since he left." Sarah's mind raced. He left his own luggage here after checking in? Looks like it, and there's more. The agent pulled out a tablet showing security footage. We tracked him to the exit. He got into a black SUV in the departure lane. License plate comes back to a rental company. Get me that rental agreement, Sarah ordered. She turned back to the shepherd, who had finally stopped barking but stood rigid, his gaze never leaving the suitcase. And somebody find out what flight this dog was supposed to be on. While the investigation unfolded around her, Sarah knelt beside the shepherd. Up close, she could see the wear of years in his face, the clouded edges of his eyes, the missing tooth on the left side, the scar across his nose. But there was sharp intelligence there too, and something else. Loyalty. This dog knew something they didn't. Whatever was in that suitcase, it mattered to him. It connected to his owner in a way that transcended training or instinct. Sarah looked at Max, who met her gaze with his characteristic intensity. 7 years they'd been partners. 7 years of learning to read each other, trust each other, save each other's lives. She knew what Max was thinking without a word exchanged between them. This case wasn't what it seemed. The TSA agent returned with a printout. Owner's name is Daniel Crawford, 58, rented the SUV 3 days ago from the airport location. Flight manifest shows the dog was booked on Flight 447 to Seattle, scheduled to depart in 30 minutes. Connecting passenger listed as Crawford himself. He was supposed to be on the same flight. Was supposed to be. He never checked in for his own boarding, just the dog. Sarah stood, her detective instincts firing. So he brings his dog to the airport, books them both on a flight, goes through this emotional goodbye, ships the dog as cargo, leaves his own luggage in the terminal, and drives away in a rental car without getting on the plane. That's what it looks like. Run his name through NCIC. I want to know everything about Daniel Crawford. As the agent hurried off, Sarah approached the suitcase. Rodriguez had already cleared it as safe, so she snapped on a pair of nitrile gloves and carefully opened it. Inside was a meticulously organized collection of items. 3 changes of clothes, all men's size large, a leather toiletry kit with high-end grooming supplies, a paperback thriller bookmark halfway through, a laptop in a padded sleeve, a phone charger, everything you'd expect for a short business trip. But there was more. At the bottom of the suitcase, tucked beneath the clothes, Sarah found a manila envelope. No markings on the outside. She opened it carefully and pulled out the contents. Photographs, dozens of them. Her hands stilled as she looked through the images. They showed various people, men in expensive suits, women in business attire, entering and exiting buildings Sarah recognized as government offices. Time stamps in the corners indicated the photos had been taken over the past 6 months. Some were candid street shots. Others appeared to be surveillance stills from security cameras. Beneath the photos was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. Sarah opened the paper, her breath catching as she read the handwritten note. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. The dog knows. Trust the dog. Evidence is encrypted. Password, Shepherd 2016. They're watching the airports. They're everywhere. Get this to Agent Morrison, FBI Atlanta Field Office. Tell him Daniel Crawford kept his promise. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her radio, but she stopped. If this was what it looked like, if Crawford was some kind of informant or undercover operative, then announcing it over open channels could be disastrous. She looked at the shepherd, who had finally calmed but still watched the suitcase intently. The pieces were falling into place. Crawford hadn't abandoned his dog. He'd sent him away to protect him. The suitcase had been left deliberately, a dead drop disguised as forgotten luggage. And the dog, loyal, desperate, intelligent, had somehow understood that the suitcase was important enough to break out of his crate and sound the alarm. "Max," Sarah said quietly. Her partner moved to her side immediately. She pulled out her phone and stepped away from the crowd, dialing a number she'd hoped never to use outside of extreme circumstances. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Special Agent Morrison." "Agent Morrison, this is Lieutenant Sarah Collins. Atlanta PD K9 Unit. I'm at Hartsfield-Jackson International, and I believe I have something that belongs to you. It's about Daniel Crawford." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was tight. "Don't say another word over the phone. Where exactly are you?" "Gate C14, Concourse C." "Stay there. Don't let anyone touch that luggage." "I'm 15 minutes out." The line went dead. Sarah looked around at the TSA agents, the airline employees, the bomb tech, all going about their procedures, filling out reports, none of them realizing they were standing in the middle of something much bigger than a lost suitcase. The shepherd sat down finally, his vigil complete. He'd done what he was sent to do in his own way. Protected his partner's mission, even as his partner had protected him. Sarah knelt beside him again, running her hand along his graying muzzle. "Good boy," she whispered. "You did good." Max pressed against her other side, and for a moment, the 3 of them, 2 trained officers and 1 retired hero, formed their own small unit in the chaos of the terminal. Sarah didn't know what was on that USB drive, didn't know where Daniel Crawford was now, or if he was even still alive. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This dog had just opened a case that would change everything. The shepherd looked up at her, his eyes holding a question she wished she could answer. She scratched behind his ears and made a silent promise. "We'll find him, boy. Whatever it takes, we'll find your partner." Overhead, the PA system announced another delay. Travelers grumbled and checked their phones. The world kept spinning, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in Concourse C. But Sarah Collins knew better. She'd learned long ago that the smallest moments, a dog's instinct, a forgotten suitcase, a promise kept, could ripple outward into something that shattered conspiracies and saved lives. The shepherd rested his head against her knee, exhausted, and they waited for the FBI to arrive. Special Agent Morrison arrived exactly 14 minutes after Sarah's call, moving through the terminal with the purposeful stride of someone who'd spent decades navigating crisis situations. He was in his late 50s, with iron-grey hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen things most people only read about in redacted reports. 2 younger agents flanked him, their hands hovering near concealed sidearms beneath dark suit jackets. Sarah stood as he approached, Max rising with her. The Belgian shepherd, Crawford's dog, lifted his head, but remained seated, too exhausted to do more than watch. Morrison's eyes swept the scene, taking in the overturned crate, the abandoned suitcase, the lingering TSA presence. His jaw tightened. "Clear the area," he said quietly to his agents. "TSA, too. I want a 20-foot perimeter and no cameras." One of the younger agents moved to comply, flashing credentials and speaking in low, authoritative tones. Within minutes, the gate area emptied, leaving only Sarah, Max, Morrison, and the shepherd. Morrison knelt beside the suitcase, his movements careful. He didn't open it. He just stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "How long has it been here?" "Approximately 40 minutes, Sarah replied. "Crawford checked in, said goodbye to his dog and left it here." The dog broke out of his cargo crate and alerted to it. "The dog broke out?" Morrison looked at the shepherd with new interest. Belgian shepherds are smart, but that takes serious motivation. "He knew," Sarah said simply. "Somehow he knew the suitcase mattered." Morrison stood, pulling out his phone and typing rapidly. "Daniel Crawford was one of ours. Deep-cover operative working a smuggling ring that's been moving everything from weapons to human cargo through this airport for the past 18 months. He was supposed to extract today. New identity, new life in Seattle. The dog was part of his cover. retired K9 from Seattle PD, that he adopted 3 years ago when he established this identity. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Was? Morrison's expression darkened. We lost contact with him 6 hours ago. His last check-in indicated he'd been compromised. The extraction was supposed to be his way out, but... He gestured at the empty terminal around them. He never made it onto the plane. The note in the suitcase, Sarah said. He wrote that if we're reading it, he didn't make it. What does that mean? Morrison's eyes snapped to her. You read the note. I'm a police officer investigating an unattended bag at an airport. Yes, I read the note. Sarah kept her voice level. It mentioned evidence on a USB drive, encrypted, password Shepherd 2016, and it said to trust the dog. For the first time, Morrison's professional mask cracked slightly. He looked at the shepherd, who gazed back with those intelligent, tired eyes. Trust the dog, he repeated softly. That sounds like Daniel. What's on the drive? Sarah asked. Morrison hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he sighed. Names, dates, bank accounts. Crawford spent 18 months documenting a network of corrupt officials, TSA, airport security, even some federal agents who've been facilitating smuggling operations through Hartsfield-Jackson. We're talking millions of dollars in illegal goods, and the people involved have everything to lose if that information goes public. So they killed him? We don't know that yet. But if they discovered he was FBI, if they knew he'd compiled evidence. Morrison trailed off, the implication clear. The USB drive is everything. It's the difference between bringing down a network or watching them disappear into the wind. Sarah looked at the suitcase. Why leave it here? Why not just hand it off to you directly? Because they're watching, Morrison said. The people Crawford was investigating work here. They know our protocols, our extraction procedures. A direct handoff would have been flagged immediately, but an abandoned suitcase, especially one his dog drew attention to, that creates chaos, confusion. It gives us cover to move the evidence without tipping anyone off that it's been transferred. Clever, Sarah admitted. And using the dog as the alarm system, nobody would suspect a grieving pet of being part of an operation. Morrison managed a grim smile. Daniel always thought outside the box. That's what made him good at this. He pulled out his phone again. I need to get this drive to our tech team immediately. We'll crack the encryption and... The shepherd suddenly stood, his body rigid. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Max reacted instantly, rising to his feet, his gaze locked on something behind Sarah. She turned, her hand moving to her sidearm. 3 airport security officers were approaching, their pace casual, but their body language off. Something in the way they moved, too synchronized, too focused, set off alarm bells in Sarah's mind. Morrison noticed too. His agents moved to intercept, but the security officers were already spreading out, creating a tactical formation. Gentlemen, Morrison called out, his voice carrying authority. This is a federal investigation. We need you to maintain the perimeter. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and cold eyes, smiled, but it didn't reach his face. Special Agent Morrison, we just wanted to make sure everything was under control. Unattended baggage is a serious concern. It's handled, Morrison replied. You can return to your normal duties. The officer's smile widened slightly. That's the thing, Agent Morrison. Airport security has jurisdiction over abandoned luggage. Protocol requires we take possession and run our own sweep. The bag has already been cleared by TSA and BombTech, Sarah interjected. There's no security threat. The officer's gaze shifted to her, his eyes flat and calculating. Lieutenant Collins, K9 unit, I recognize you. He looked at Max, then at the shepherd. 2 dogs alerting to the same bag. That's unusual, don't you think? Sarah's instincts screamed danger. This wasn't routine security procedure. This was something else entirely. Morrison must have sensed it too, because his hand moved subtly toward his hip. His agents shifted position, creating a protective triangle around the suitcase. "I appreciate your concern," Morrison said, his tone hardening. "But this investigation is now under federal jurisdiction. I'm going to have to ask you and your colleagues to step back." The officer's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Agent Morrison. We have our protocols." The tension ratcheted up instantly. Sarah's hand tightened on her sidearm. Max's growl intensified, a sound she'd heard only a handful of times in their 7 years together, the sound that meant he'd identified a threat. The shepherd's hackles rose, his lips pulling back from his teeth, and then everything happened at once. The lead officer reached for something inside his jacket. Morrison's agents drew their weapons. Sarah pulled her sidearm, her training taking over. "Hands where I can see them! Now!" The officer froze, his hand inside his jacket. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The terminal felt impossibly quiet, the normal sounds of airport life distant and muted. "Slowly," Morrison said, his own weapon now drawn and aimed. "Very slowly remove your hand and show me what you're reaching for." The officer's smile finally disappeared. His hand emerged, holding not a weapon but a radio. "I was just calling for backup," he said calmly. "Given the aggressive response from federal agents, I thought it was warranted." "Bullshit," Sarah said. "Airport security doesn't move in tactical formation for abandoned luggage. Who sent you?" The officer's eyes flickered toward the suitcase, just for a second, but it was enough. He knew what was in it, or at least he knew it mattered. Morrison must have seen it too. "Lieutenant Collins, I need you to take custody of that suitcase. My agents will provide cover. We're leaving, now." Sarah moved quickly, grabbing the handle of the suitcase while keeping her weapon trained on the security officers. The shepherd stayed glued to her side, his protective instincts fully engaged. "You can't remove evidence from the scene," the lead officer protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is a federal investigation," Morrison repeated, "and you're about to be investigated yourselves. I suggest you stay exactly where you are and contact your supervisor. Tell them Special Agent Morrison wants to have a conversation about airport security protocols and who exactly they're working for." The officers didn't move, but Sarah could see the calculation happening behind their eyes. They were outgunned and outnumbered, and they knew it. Whatever their orders had been, they couldn't complete them now, not with federal agents and an armed police lieutenant as witnesses. Morrison gestured toward the service corridor. "Let's move." They retreated in a tactical formation, Morrison's agents providing rear security while Sarah carried the suitcase, Max and the shepherd flanking her. The security officers watched, but didn't follow. Yet. As soon as they were around the corner and out of sight, Morrison spoke rapidly into his phone. "This is Morrison. We have the package, but the scene was compromised. Airport security attempted to interfere. I need a full review of security personnel on duty in Concourse C and a protective detail at the field office, now." They moved through service corridors Sarah had never seen, winding passages marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Morrison knew exactly where he was going, navigating the maze of the airport's hidden infrastructure with practiced ease. Finally, they emerged into an underground parking garage. A black SUV with tinted windows sat idling near the elevator bank, engine running. Morrison opened the back door. "Get in, both of you." Sarah hesitated. "Both." Morrison looked at the shepherd. "Crawford sent his dog away to protect him. We owe it to Daniel to make sure he stays protected. The people who came after that suitcase know the dog was involved. They'll see him as a loose end." Sarah understood. The shepherd had become a witness in his own way, and witnesses in cases like this had a tendency to disappear. She guided the shepherd into the SUV, then climbed in herself with Max. Morrison took the passenger seat while one of his agents drove. The other agent stayed behind, presumably to secure the scene and deal with the corrupt security officers. As they pulled out of the garage, Sarah looked back at the shepherd. He was panting heavily, his anxiety palpable. She reached over and rested her hand on his head. "You did good, boy. Your partner would be proud." The dog looked at her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that broke her heart. Hope. He still believed Crawford was coming back. Morrison was already on his phone again, coordinating with his team. Sarah caught fragments of conversation. Corrupted security database, internal investigation, our protective custody. The implications were staggering. If Crawford had been right, if there really was a network of corrupt officials embedded in airport operations, then the evidence in that suitcase could bring down dozens of people, and those people would kill to keep it hidden. The SUV merged onto the highway, heading toward downtown Atlanta and the FBI field office. Sarah watched the city blur past, her mind racing. She'd started the day expecting routine patrols and maybe a few baggage inspections. Now she was sitting in an FBI vehicle with classified evidence, a traumatized dog, and the knowledge that somewhere out there a federal agent was missing and possibly dead. Max pressed against her leg, sensing her tension. She scratched behind his ears absently, grateful for his steady presence. Morrison ended his call and turned in his seat to look at her. "Lieutenant Collins, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you willing to see this through?" "See what through?" "This investigation. It's going to get complicated, dangerous. The people Crawford was tracking have resources, connections, and a lot to lose. They've already shown they're willing to kill. If you're involved, you become a target." Sarah looked down at the shepherd, then at Max, then back at Morrison. "An agent is missing. Evidence suggests he's been compromised by corrupt officials, and his dog just risked everything to make sure that evidence didn't disappear." She met Morrison's gaze steadily. "Yeah, I'm willing to see it through." Morrison nodded slowly. "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need all the help we can get. Crawford didn't just document the smuggling operation. According to his last message, he'd identified the person running it, someone high up in the airport's command structure, someone who's been operating under everyone's noses for years." "Do you know who?" "Not yet. That information is on the USB drive, encrypted behind that password." Morrison glanced at the suitcase resting at Sarah's feet. "Shepherd 2016. Any idea what that could mean?" Sarah looked at the dog beside her, the faithful partner who'd traveled across the country in cargo holds, lived undercover for 3 years, and ultimately broken free to sound the alarm when his handler needed him most. "Shepherds are loyal," she said quietly. "They protect their pack even when it costs them everything. Crawford adopted this dog in 2016, right? Made him part of his cover, part of his life." She ran her hand along the dog's scarred muzzle. "The password isn't just a random code. It's a tribute, a reminder of what matters when everything else is stripped away." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Crawford always said the best partners were the ones who'd run into fire for you without being asked." "He wasn't wrong," Sarah said, thinking of Max, of all the times her partner had put himself between her and danger without hesitation. The SUV pulled into the underground parking of the FBI field office, a stark, concrete structure fortified against threats both physical and digital. As they exited the vehicle, Morrison's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face went pale. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Morrison showed her the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "We're still watching." Below the text was a photo, time-stamped from 5 minutes ago. It showed Sarah in the SUV, taken through the tinted windows from an impossible angle. Someone had followed them. Someone with resources sophisticated enough to track a federal vehicle and penetrate supposedly secure communications. Morrison's jaw clenched. "Get inside. Now!" They hurried through security checkpoints, the suitcase never leaving Sarah's hands. The shepherd stayed close, his training as a former K9 evident in the way he moved, alert, protective, ready. As they stepped into the elevator that would take them to Morrison's office, Sarah caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked tired, her uniform rumpled from the chaos of the past hour. But her eyes were hard, focused. She'd made a promise to a dog, and through him to a missing agent she'd never met. Whatever was on that USB drive, whatever secrets Crawford had died, or was dying, to protect, Sarah Collins was going to make sure they saw the light of day. The elevator doors closed, and they ascended into the heart of the investigation. The suitcase sat silent now, but Sarah knew the truth. It wouldn't stay silent for long. The FBI field office conference room hummed with tension as Morrison's tech specialist, a sharp-eyed woman named Agent Chen, connected the USB drive to an isolated laptop. The suitcase sat open on the table, its contents already photographed and catalogued. Sarah stood near the window, Max at her feet, while the shepherd lay near the door. Positioned, she noticed, where he could watch both entrances simultaneously. Old habits from his K9 days, she thought. Some training never fades. "Password accepted," Chen announced, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Decrypting now. This is going to take a few minutes." Crawford used military-grade encryption. Morrison paced the length of the room, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what protocols say. I want every member of airport security who was on duty today interviewed. Cross-reference their financial records, travel history, everything." He paused, listening. "No, I don't think I'm overreacting. 3 of them tried to confiscate federal evidence at gunpoint. That's not protocol, that's panic." Sarah watched the city through the bulletproof glass. Somewhere out there, Daniel Crawford was either hiding or already dead. And the people responsible were sophisticated enough to track federal vehicles and send threatening messages in real time. Her phone buzzed. A text from her captain. "Collins, need you back at precinct. We have a situation." She frowned and texted back, "In the middle of something. Can it wait?" The response came quickly. "No. Now." Sarah showed the message to Morrison, who read it and immediately tensed. "Did your captain know you were involved in a federal investigation?" "I called it in when I first found the suitcase. Standard procedure for any K9 alert at the airport." "Who else knew?" Sarah thought back through the chaos of the past 2 hours. TSA command, airport operations, dispatch logged it. She met Morrison's eyes. "You think they're using my department to pull me away?" "I think," Morrison said carefully, "that if there's corruption in airport security, there could be corruption anywhere. These people have been operating for 18 months without detection. That requires resources, planning, and people on the inside of multiple agencies." "You're saying my captain might be compromised?" "I'm saying we can't take anything for granted." Morrison moved to the conference table and pulled out a tablet. "Chen, can you access Atlanta PD's dispatch logs?" "Probably, but that's—" "Do it," Morrison ordered. "I want to see what situation is supposedly urgent enough to pull Lieutenant Collins out of a federal investigation." Chen's fingers danced across another keyboard. After a moment, she frowned. "That's odd. There's no record of any emergency call or incident requiring K9 response in the past hour. The only thing logged is a routine administrative request for Lieutenant Collins to report to the captain's office." Sarah felt cold. Administrative requests don't come by text, and they definitely don't come with "now" attached. Morrison's expression darkened. "They're trying to separate you from the evidence, get you alone. He turned to one of his agents. "I want a protective detail on Lieutenant Collins. She doesn't go anywhere without FBI escort." "Sir, I'm a police officer," Sarah protested. "I can take care of myself." Crawford was a decorated federal agent with 15 years of experience, Morrison said bluntly. "And look where that got him. These people don't play fair, Lieutenant. They don't give warnings. They eliminate threats." Before Sarah could respond, Chen gasped. "Got it. The files are decrypted." Everyone moved to crowd around the laptop. The screen filled with folders, each labeled with dates and locations. Chen opened the most recent one, and a spreadsheet appeared, dense with data. Morrison leaned in, his eyes scanning rapidly. Jesus Christ! He documented everything: shipment manifests, bribes, meeting locations. He scrolled down. "Look at these names: TSA supervisors, airport administrators, cargo handlers." His finger stopped on one entry, his face going white. No, that can't be right." "What?" Sarah asked, moving closer. Morrison pointed to a name highlighted in red: Deputy Director Marcus Holloway, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport Operations. "Holloway oversees all airport security," Morrison said quietly. "He's been with the airport for 20 years. He has direct access to every system, every protocol, every piece of intelligence that moves through that facility." He looked at Sarah. "If Holloway is dirty, then he knew about Crawford's investigation from the beginning. He's been watching us this whole time." Chen scrolled through more files. "There's more. Crawford documented meetings between Holloway and known smugglers, bank accounts in the Caymans, properties purchased under shell companies. He even has recordings." She clicked on an audio file. A voice filled the room, tinny through the laptop speakers, but clear enough to understand. "Don't care how you do it. The shipment arrives Tuesday night. Make sure TSA is looking the other way, and make sure the cargo handlers know which containers to fast-track. We're moving 23 crates, and every single one better make it through clean." "That's expensive," another voice responded. "My people are taking significant risks." "Your people are being paid significantly. Tell them to do their jobs, or I'll find people who will." Morrison's jaw clenched. "That's Holloway. I'd recognize his voice anywhere." He looked at Chen. "When was this recorded?" 3 weeks ago. Crawford must have been wearing a wire during a meeting." Chen opened another file. "And there's video too. Security camera footage from inside the airport, timestamps matching the audio recordings. Crawford hacked their own surveillance system." The implications were staggering. Crawford hadn't just gathered evidence of corruption, he'd built an airtight case, every transaction documented, every meeting recorded, every piece of the conspiracy laid out in meticulous detail. "This is enough to put Holloway away for life," Morrison said, "along with at least a dozen other people." He pulled out his phone. "I need to call the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're going to need warrants, and we're going to need them fast. Once Holloway realizes we have this evidence—" The shepherd suddenly stood, his ears pricked forward. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Max reacted a second later, moving to the door, his body tense. Sarah's hand went to her sidearm. "What is it, boy?" Morrison held up a hand for silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Too many footsteps, and they were moving with purpose. Morrison's other agent, a young man named Reeves, was positioned outside the door. They heard his voice, muffled but professional. "This is a restricted area. I'm going to need to see identification." A pause. Then a voice Sarah didn't recognize. "We're with airport security. Deputy Director Holloway sent us to coordinate with Special Agent Morrison." Sarah and Morrison exchanged glances. "He's here," Morrison whispered. "He knows." "How?" Sarah asked. "We just decrypted the files, unless—" She looked at the laptop, realization dawning. "The encryption. When we opened it, did it send any kind of signal?" Chen's face went pale. "Oh, God. Crawford would have needed a way to know if his evidence was compromised. He might have embedded a ping, something that would alert him if someone accessed the files with the wrong credentials. She typed frantically. Yes, there it is, hidden in the code. Every time someone opens these files, it sends a notification to a predetermined number. Crawford's number, Morrison said, which means whoever has Crawford's phone got the notification, Sarah finished. They know we have the evidence, and they know exactly where we are. The footsteps outside grew louder. More voices joined the first, and Sarah could hear the tone shifting from professional courtesy to barely concealed aggression. Morrison moved quickly to the conference table, ejecting the USB drive and pocketing it. Chen, wipe that laptop. Now, everything. But the backup? We'll worry about that later. Right now, we need to assume this location is compromised. He turned to Sarah. Is there another way out of here? Sarah thought fast. She'd been to the FBI field office a handful of times for joint task force meetings. Service stairs at the end of the hall. They connect to the parking garage. Too obvious. They'll have it covered. Morrison pulled out his phone and brought up the building's floor plan. There, maintenance access, leads to the HVAC system, which connects to the building next door. You want us to crawl through air ducts? Sarah asked incredulously. I want us to not be sitting targets when Holloway's people breach that door. Morrison moved to the window, looking down at the street below. They're not just at the door, look! Sarah joined him. 3 black SUVs were parked on the street, and more were arriving. Men in tactical gear were taking positions around the building's exits, not FBI gear. The uniforms were wrong, the coordination too polished. Private security, Morrison said. Holloway must have contractors on his payroll. He's staging a raid on a federal building in broad daylight. That's insane, Chen protested. He'll never get away with it. He will if he kills everyone who knows what's on that drive and destroys the evidence. Morrison's voice was grim. He's all in now. No way back. Outside the door, voices rose. Agent Reeves was arguing with someone, his tone becoming more heated. Then Sarah heard the distinctive sound of a weapon being drawn. Federal agent, lower your weapons immediately. We have authorization from... The argument was cut short by the sound of a scuffle, followed by a heavy thud. Someone had taken Reeves down. Morrison drew his sidearm. Maintenance access. Now, Chen, you're with Collins. I'll cover your exit. Sir, we should call for backup, Chen protested. We did. Look out the window, that is the backup, bought and paid for by Holloway. Morrison moved to the door, positioning himself to the side. Lieutenant, get your dog and Crawford's dog out of here. That USB drive is the only thing keeping us alive. If they destroy it, Crawford died for nothing. Sarah whistled softly. Max and the shepherd moved to her side immediately. She grabbed the suitcase, they might need the physical documents inside, and headed for the door at the back of the conference room that led to the maintenance corridor. Chen was already there, using her security card to unlock it. The door clicked open, revealing a narrow hallway lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Behind them, the conference room door shuddered under a heavy impact. Someone was trying to force it open. Morrison braced himself, weapon trained on the door. Go, I'll buy you time. Morrison, Sarah started. That's an order, Lieutenant. Get that evidence to the U.S. Attorney. Make sure Crawford's sacrifice means something. The door shuddered again, the frame beginning to crack. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight, but she knew Morrison was right. The evidence mattered more than any of them. She nodded once, sharp and military, then turned and ran into the maintenance corridor, the 2 dogs keeping pace beside her. Chen slammed the door behind them and jammed her security card into the electronic lock, overriding it to seal the door. That'll hold for maybe 2 minutes. They moved quickly through the narrow space, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Behind them, muffled by distance and steel, Sarah heard gunfire. Her stomach clenched, but she forced herself to keep moving. The corridor opened into a larger space, the mechanical room, filled with massive HVAC units and the constant roar of machinery. Chen led them to an access panel in the wall, pulling it open to reveal a crawl space barely 3 feet high. "You've got to be kidding me," Sarah muttered. "It's this, or face whatever's coming through that door." Chen crawled in first, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Sarah looked at the 2 dogs. Max would follow her anywhere, she knew that, but the shepherd was older, larger, and had already been through hell today. The dog looked back at her, and Sarah saw the same determination she'd seen at the airport. He'd come this far. He wasn't stopping now. "Okay, boys, let's move." She crawled in after Chen, the suitcase scraping against the metal sides of the crawl space. Max followed, then the shepherd, his movements slower but steady. The space was cramped and stifling, the air thick with dust and the smell of old machinery. Sarah's radio crackled, someone trying to reach her, but she couldn't risk responding. Not yet. They crawled for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the metal scraping her elbows and knees. Finally, Chen's light found another access panel. She kicked it open, and cool air rushed in. They emerged into a stairwell in the adjacent building, a commercial office space by the look of it. Chen closed the access panel behind them and looked at Sarah. "Now what?" Sarah thought fast. "We need to get this evidence somewhere safe, somewhere Holloway can't reach. The U.S. Attorney's office is downtown, but Holloway will have it watched," Sarah finished. "We need to think like Crawford. Where would he have set up a backup plan?" The shepherd barked once, sharp and insistent. Both women looked at him. The dog was staring at the suitcase in Sarah's hand, his body tense. "What is it, boy?" Sarah set the suitcase down and opened it again, looking through the contents more carefully this time. The clothes, the toiletries, the laptop. She'd seen all of this before. But Crawford had been meticulous, paranoid even. He wouldn't have left evidence in just one place. Her fingers found something hard, sewn into the lining of the suitcase. She pulled out her pocket knife and carefully cut the fabric. A second USB drive fell into her palm. "Backup," Chen breathed. "He made a backup." Sarah turned the drive over in her hand. Taped to it was a small piece of paper with an address written in the same handwriting as the note they'd found earlier. "That's in East Atlanta," Sarah said, recognizing the neighborhood. "Industrial area. Mostly warehouses." "A safe house," Chen said. Crawford must have set up a dead-drop location, somewhere he could go if the extraction failed. Sarah pocketed both USB drives and closed the suitcase. "Then that's where we're going. If Crawford is still alive, that's where he'll be. And if he's not—" She looked at the shepherd, who was watching her with those intense, hopeful eyes. "Then we finish what he started." They moved quickly down the stairs, emerging into the building's lobby. Through the glass doors, Sarah could see the street. The tactical teams were still focused on the FBI building next door, giving them a narrow window. "My car is 2 blocks away," Chen said. "We move fast, stay low, and—" The shepherd suddenly pulled away from Sarah, his nose to the ground. He was tracking something, his entire body focused on a scent trail that led toward the back of the lobby. "We don't have time for this," Chen said urgently. But Max had joined the shepherd, both dogs now moving in sync toward a service corridor marked "Deliveries Only." Sarah's instincts screamed at her to follow. "Wait, they're onto something." The dogs led them through the corridor and out into a loading dock. A delivery van sat parked there, engine running, back doors slightly ajar. The shepherd barked once, then twice, his urgency unmistakable. Sarah approached the van carefully, her weapon drawn. "Federal officer, come out with your hands visible." For a long moment, nothing. Then a weak voice from inside. "Shepherd, is that you, boy?" Sarah's heart jumped. She pulled open the van doors. Daniel Crawford lay inside, bloodied and barely conscious, but alive. And the shepherd, faithful to the last, pressed his nose against his partner's hand and finally stopped running. Daniel Crawford's eyes fluttered open as the shepherd licked his face, whining softly. Blood stained his shirt, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. Sarah holstered her weapon and climbed into the van, her training as a first responder kicking in immediately. "Don't move," she said, pulling out her radio. "We need to get you medical attention." Crawford's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals. Holloway has people everywhere." His voice was ragged, each word costing him. "Medical examiner's office, trauma centers. They'll finish the job." Chen appeared at the van doors. "Agent Crawford, thank God." You thought right," Crawford interrupted, coughing. Blood flecked his lips. "They tried. 3 of Holloway's men cornered me in the rental car lot. Would have succeeded too if I hadn't." He gestured weakly at the delivery uniform he was wearing, took one of their radios, heard them calling in the hit as completed, so I stayed dead. Sarah examined his wounds quickly. Gunshot to the shoulder, another that had grazed his ribs. Serious, but not immediately fatal if they could stop the bleeding. She pulled off her jacket and pressed it against the shoulder wound. Crawford grimaced but didn't cry out. "The suitcase," he managed. "Did it work? Did Shepard find it?" The dog pressed closer at the sound of his name, his tail wagging weakly. Crawford's good hand moved to scratch behind the shepherd's ears, and Sarah saw tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "He found it," Sarah confirmed. "Broke out of his cargo crate and alerted the entire terminal. Your evidence is safe. We have both drives." Crawford's eyes widened. "Both? You found the backup?" "Sewn into the suitcase lining," Chen said. "Smart. Paranoid," Crawford corrected, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "But in this business, paranoia keeps you breathing." He looked at Sarah. "Who are you?" "Lieutenant Sarah Collins, Atlanta PD K9 unit. This is my partner, Max." She gestured at her dog, who was sitting alert near the van doors, keeping watch. "We were at the airport on routine patrol when your dog made the alert." Crawford studied her for a long moment, then looked at Max, then back at Shepard. "Fitting," he said softly, one K9 recognizing another's work. Shepard was Seattle PD for 6 years before he retired, best narcotics dog in the Pacific Northwest. "He hasn't forgotten his training," Sarah said. "The way he tracked you here, that was pure instinct and experience." "He's always been smarter than me," Crawford admitted. "I adopted him as part of my cover, but somewhere along the way." He trailed off, his hand still resting on the dog's head. "He became the only honest thing in my life. Every lie I told, every fake identity I wore, he didn't care. To him, I was just his person." The shepherd leaned into Crawford's touch. Content now that his human was found. The frantic energy that had driven him through the airport, through the escape from the crate, through the desperate alert to the suitcase, all of it had settled into quiet satisfaction. Sarah felt her radio crackle. Morrison's voice came through, strained. "Collins, respond. What's your status?" She keyed the radio. "We're secure, and we found Crawford. He's alive, but wounded." A pause. "Thank God. Listen carefully. Holloway's people breached the office. We exchanged fire. I'm pinned down with local police backup, but the situation is contained." "Where are you?" Sarah hesitated, looking at Crawford. The agent shook his head sharply. "Don't tell him," he whispered. "Not over radio. Not until we know who's listening." "Understood," Morrison's voice continued. "The building next door, loading dock. Get Crawford to a secure location. I'm sending coordinates for an FBI safe house outside the city. Can you make it there?" "Affirmative," Sarah responded, not mentioning they'd already found Crawford, or revealing their exact position. If Holloway's people were monitoring FBI frequencies, the less information transmitted, the better. Chen was already moving, checking the delivery van's fuel gauge and keys. "Vans full of medical supplies," she said, pulling open boxes. This must be how Crawford was planning to treat himself. "Former Army medic," Crawford explained, wincing as Sarah adjusted the pressure on his wound. "Learned to patch holes in Fallujah. Figured the skill would come in handy eventually." Sarah helped him into a sitting position, bracing him against the van's interior wall. Max and Shepard maintained their watch, the two dogs working in silent coordination. Max at the doors, Shepard beside Crawford, both of them alert to any threat. "We need to move," Chen said. "Morrison bought us time, but once Holloway realizes Crawford's not in that building, he'll expand the search." Sarah nodded, then looked at Crawford. "The address you left with the backup drive, the warehouse in East Atlanta. Is that where you were heading?" "Yes. It's a storage facility I rented under a fake identity 6 months ago. Everything Holloway doesn't know about: additional evidence, emergency cash, clean weapons, medical supplies. If we can get there, we can fortify and plan our next move." Crawford coughed again, more blood appearing. "But I'm slowing you down. Maybe you should—" "We're not leaving you," Sarah interrupted. "You risked everything to expose this conspiracy. We're seeing it through together." Crawford looked at her, something like gratitude flickering in his pain-glazed eyes. "Morrison picked a good ally." "Morrison didn't pick me," Sarah said. "Your dog did." Chen climbed into the driver's seat, and Sarah helped Crawford into the back of the van, arranging the medical supplies around him. Max and Shepard jumped in, positioning themselves protectively on either side of the wounded agent. As the van pulled out of the loading dock, Sarah kept watch through the back windows. The tactical teams were still focused on the FBI building, giving them a clear path onto the street. Chen drove carefully, obeying all traffic laws, just another delivery van in Atlanta's afternoon traffic. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We know you have Crawford. We know you have the evidence. There's still time to make a deal." She showed it to Crawford, who read it and laughed bitterly. "Holloway's desperate. Good. Desperate people make mistakes." "What kind of deal could he possibly offer?" Sarah asked. "Money, lots of it. Protection, new identities, everything I supposedly wanted when I started this investigation." Crawford closed his eyes. He doesn't understand that some things aren't for sale. Sarah thought about Morrison, still pinned down in the FBI building, buying them time with his own safety. She thought about Agent Reeves, who'd been taken down trying to protect the evidence. And she thought about Shepard, who'd endured separation and fear and a cross-country journey as cargo, all because his handler needed him safe. "No," she said, deleting the text. "We don't make deals with people like Holloway." The warehouse district of East Atlanta rose around them. Industrial buildings, graffiti-covered walls, the skeletal remains of manufacturing plants that had closed decades ago. Chen navigated the cracked streets carefully, following Crawford's whispered directions. "There," Crawford said, pointing to a nondescript storage facility surrounded by chain-link fence. "Unit 47B, code is 2847. Chen pulled up to the gate, punched in the code, and drove through as it rolled open. The facility was mostly empty, just a few scattered vehicles that looked like they'd been abandoned years ago. Perfect cover. Unit 47B was a mid-sized storage bay with a rolling metal door. Chen parked, and Sarah helped Crawford out of the van. The agent was weakening, his face pale from blood loss. They needed to treat his wounds properly. And soon. Crawford pulled a key from his pocket with trembling hands and unlocked the storage unit. The door rolled up with a metallic screech, revealing a space that looked more like a tactical operations center than a storage bay. Weapons lined one wall, rifles, handguns, tactical gear, all secured and organized. Another wall held surveillance equipment, computers and communication devices. Medical supplies filled several footlockers, and a cot with military-spec sleeping bags sat in one corner. A small generator hummed quietly, providing power. "Home, sweet home," Crawford said weakly. "Or it would have been if I'd made it here yesterday." Sarah and Chen got him onto the cot, while Chen began treating his wounds properly, cleaning, bandaging, administering antibiotics from the medical supplies. Sarah explored the space. Everything was meticulously organized, every piece of equipment labeled and maintained. Crawford hadn't just been paranoid, he'd been prepared. She found a laptop connected to what looked like a satellite uplink. The screen showed multiple feeds, security cameras positioned around the storage facility, and traffic cameras from key intersections, even what appeared to be a back door into the airport's surveillance system. "Crawford," she called, "you've been watching the airport this whole time?" "Remotely," he confirmed, his voice steadier now that Chen had given him pain medication. "Holloway doesn't know I can access the system. I've been documenting everything. Even after the official investigation ended, the USB drives only contained data through last week. Everything since then is on that laptop." Sarah felt a chill. "Everything since then, including video of Holloway meeting with his contractors 4 hours ago," Crawford finished. "Ordering the hit on me, ordering the raid on the FBI building. All of it recorded and backed up to a secure server." He managed a grim smile. "I told you, paranoid." Max suddenly tensed, his attention locked on the storage facility entrance. Shepard reacted a second later, both dogs moving to defensive positions. Sarah drew her weapon, moving to the shadows beside the door. Chen did the same, positioning herself to cover Crawford. The sound of vehicles approaching echoed through the facility, multiple vehicles moving fast. "How did they find us?" Chen whispered. Crawford's face went pale. "The van, if it has a GPS tracker—" "We're blown," Sarah finished. The vehicles screeched to a halt outside the unit. Doors slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. Sarah counted at least 6 distinct footfalls, probably more. A voice called out, amplified by a megaphone. "Federal agents, come out with your hands visible. We have the facility surrounded." Sarah's blood ran cold. That wasn't FBI protocol. That was Holloway's people pretending to be FBI. Crawford struggled to sit up, reaching for a rifle mounted on the wall. "There's a tunnel," he gasped. "Behind that footlocker, leads to the adjacent facility. It's our only way out." Chen moved immediately, pulling the footlocker aside to reveal a hatch in the concrete floor. She yanked it open, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by emergency lighting. "You two go," Crawford said, checking the rifle's magazine. "I'll hold them off." "Not a chance," Sarah said. "We all go, or none of us do." "Lieutenant, I can barely walk. I'll just—" Shepard growled. A deep rumbling sound that silenced Crawford mid-sentence. The dog moved to his handler's side and gripped Crawford's sleeve in his teeth, tugging insistently. "Your dog disagrees with you," Sarah said, "and I trust his judgment." Together, Sarah and Chen got Crawford onto his feet. The agent slung the rifle over his good shoulder, grimacing with pain. Max led the way into the tunnel, Shepard staying close to Crawford, supporting him when he stumbled. Behind them, the sound of the storage unit door being forced open echoed through the space. Voices shouted, boots thundered on concrete. Chen sealed the hatch behind them, just as gunfire erupted above, bullets punching through the thin metal roof of the storage unit. They moved through the tunnel as quickly as Crawford's condition allowed, the emergency lights creating a surreal, strobing effect. The tunnel stretched for 50 yards before opening into another storage unit. Chen had already called Morrison on her cell, giving him their new position and requesting immediate backup. They emerged into the adjacent unit, this one full of old furniture and boxes. Civilian storage abandoned long ago. Crawford collapsed against a dusty couch, his breathing labored. "Can't." "Keep running," he managed. "You don't have to," Sarah said. "We hold here. Backup is coming." She moved to the door, peering out through a crack in the metal. The tactical team was still focused on Unit 47B, not yet realizing their targets had escaped. It bought them time, but not much. Max and Shepard took up positions on either side of the door, their professional training evident in how they moved and watched. Sarah had worked with K9 units for 7 years, but she'd never seen 2 dogs sync up so perfectly, so instantly. "They're packed now," Crawford said, noticing her observation. "Dogs recognize their own kind. Shepard knows Max is military working dog, just like he was. They're operating as a team." Sarah felt a surge of pride watching her partner work alongside Crawford's dog. This was what K9 units were meant to be. Trust, instinct and loyalty, forged into something greater than the sum of its parts. Her radio crackled. "Collins, this is Morrison. We're 3 minutes out. 3 units, all verified clean. Can you hold?" "Affirmative," Sarah responded. "But we've got tangos at the adjacent unit. They're going to figure out we're gone any second." "Copy that. Go loud if you have to. Help is coming." As if on cue, shouts of frustration came from Unit 47B. They'd discovered the tunnel. Seconds later, Sarah heard movement in the corridor outside. Someone was checking the other units. A shadow appeared at their door. A man's voice. "This one's locked from the inside. Breach it," another voice ordered. Sarah looked at Chen, at Crawford, at the 2 dogs ready to defend them. She thought about Morrison racing toward them, about all the evidence they'd gathered, about the conspiracy they were about to expose. Sometimes she'd learned over 7 years with Max, you don't get to choose your battles. Sometimes the battles choose you. "Get ready," she said quietly, raising her weapon. The storage unit door began to shudder under repeated impacts. And Sarah Collins, lieutenant of the Atlanta PD K9 unit, prepared to hold the line. The storage unit door buckled under another heavy impact, metal groaning against the lock mechanism. Sarah counted the seconds in her head. Morrison had said 3 minutes, and 2 had already passed. 60 seconds to hold the line. Max's hackles rose, a low growl vibrating through his chest. Shepard mirrored him. Both dogs positioned in a defensive stance that would have made their training instructors proud. Behind them, Crawford struggled to raise his rifle, despite the pain medication dulling his movements. "Don't," Sarah said quietly. "Save your strength. We've got this." The door shuddered again, the lock beginning to give way. Through the gap, Sarah could see shadows moving, at least 4 men, possibly more. They were coordinating, professional, not airport security playing at tactical operations. These were the real thing. Chen had her weapon trained on the door, her breathing steady and controlled. "Collins, if they breach—" "They won't," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Then she heard it, the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, multiple vehicles approaching fast, the distinctive wail of federal response units. The shadows outside the door froze. Voices rose in urgent consultation. The battering stopped. Morrison's voice boomed through a megaphone. "FBI, drop your weapons and get on the ground, now!" Chaos erupted in the corridor. Shouts of confusion, running footsteps, the crack of gunfire. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, protecting Crawford with her body, while Chen covered the door. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. A few exchanges, then silence. Then Morrison's voice again. "Collins, you clear?" Sarah keyed her radio with shaking hands. "Clear. Crawford's wounded but stable. Tangos were attempting to breach when you arrived. We've got 6 in custody, Holloway's contractors. They're talking already. Seems loyalty disappears when federal charges start piling up." Morrison's voice held grim satisfaction. "Open the door. Let's get you out of here." Sarah unlocked the storage unit and pulled the door open. Morrison stood in the corridor, flanked by a dozen FBI agents in full tactical gear. Behind them, several men lay prone on the ground, zip-tied and looking significantly less confident than they had moments ago. Morrison took in the scene, Crawford bleeding on the couch, the two dogs still in defensive positions, Sarah and Chen looking like they'd been through a war. "Hell of a day, Lieutenant." "Hell of a case," Sarah replied. Two FBI medics moved in to treat Crawford properly. The agent protested weakly, but Shepard's presence seemed to calm him. The dog stayed pressed against his handler's side, refusing to leave even as the medics worked. Morrison knelt beside the couch. "Daniel, you scared the hell out of us." "Sorry, boss," Crawford managed. "Wasn't exactly my plan." "Your evidence is solid. We've already executed warrants on Holloway's office, his home, his bank accounts. The U.S. attorney is preparing charges." Morrison's expression hardened. "But Holloway himself is in the wind, disappeared about an hour ago. We have alerts at every airport, train station and border crossing, but he knows all those systems," Crawford finished. "He helped design the protocols. He'll slip through." "Not necessarily," Sarah said slowly. "An idea was forming, born from 7 years of working with Max, of learning to trust a dog's instincts over human assumptions." She looked at Shepard. "Your dog tracked you across a storage facility, through chaos and gunfire. He found you when nobody else could." Crawford's eyes widened. I think Holloway has been in close proximity to you for months. Planning meetings, surveillance operations, close contact. His scent is all over your case files, your equipment, everything in that first storage unit." Sarah knelt beside Shepard. "This dog knows what Holloway smells like, and he's trained to track." Morrison caught on immediately. "You want to use Crawford's dog to hunt Holloway?" "He's retired," Crawford protested. "He hasn't done field work in 3 years." Shepard's ears pricked forward at the word work, his tail giving a single wag. Sarah saw recognition in those brown eyes, the same look Max got when a case was breaking open, when all the training and instinct aligned toward a single purpose. "He's not that retired," Sarah said. "Are you, boy?" Morrison pulled out his phone, bringing up a map. Holloway's last known position was his office at the airport 2 hours ago. Security footage shows him leaving in a private vehicle, headed toward the industrial district. He looked at Sarah. "Same direction as this storage facility." "He came looking for Crawford personally," Chen said. "Wanted to make sure the job was finished." "Which means he was close," Sarah said. "Recently. His scent will still be strong in the area." She stood looking at Morrison. "Give us something with Holloway's scent on it. A piece of clothing, anything from his office. Let's see what Shepard can do." 20 minutes later, they were back at Unit 47B, now swarming with FBI technicians, processing evidence. Morrison had produced one of Holloway's suit jackets, retrieved from his office. Sarah held it out to Shepard, letting the dog investigate it thoroughly. "Seek," Crawford commanded weakly from the back of an FBI medical van, his voice carrying the authority of years working K9 operations. "Shepard, seek." The Belgian Shepherd's entire demeanor changed. His nose went to the ground, working in the methodical pattern of a trained tracking dog. Max watched, his own training recognizing the work of a fellow professional. Shepard circled the storage facility twice, then locked onto a scent trail leading toward the back fence. Sarah followed, Max at her side, both dogs now working in tandem. Morrison and a tactical team moved with them, weapons ready. The trail led through a gap in the fence, across an empty lot littered with industrial debris, and toward a cluster of abandoned warehouses that had once housed aircraft parts manufacturing. Sarah recognized the area. It bordered the southern edge of the airport property. "He's going for the airport," Morrison said. "Son of a bitch thinks he can still get out through his own facility." "He probably can," Chen said. "If he knows where the cameras are, where security is weakest." "He wrote the security protocols," Crawford called from the van, refusing to stay behind despite his injuries. "He knows every blind spot, every gap in coverage. If he reaches the airfield, he could be on a private plane before we could stop him." Shepard's pace increased, his tracking becoming more urgent. They were getting close. Sarah could feel it, the same electric tension that preceded every major bust she'd ever been part of with Max. The warehouses loomed ahead, their broken windows like hollow eyes, watching their approach. Shepard led them to the largest structure, a massive hangar that had once serviced commercial aircraft. The main doors stood slightly ajar. Morrison signaled his team to form up. "Tactical approach. Shepard and Max stay back." "No," Crawford said, limping up despite the medics' protests. "Shepard knows what he's doing, and if Holloway's in there, having 2 K9s might be the advantage we need." Morrison studied the dogs for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay behind the tactical team, but if shooting starts, you get those dogs out. Understood?" "Understood," Sarah replied. They moved into the hangar in formation, tactical agents leading, Sarah and Crawford with their dogs in the middle, Morrison covering the rear. The interior was vast and shadowy, filled with abandoned equipment and the skeletal remains of aircraft in various states of disassembly. Shepard's nose worked constantly, leading them deeper into the space. Then he stopped, his body going rigid, ears forward. Max adopted the same posture a second later, alert, target acquired. Morrison hand-signaled his team to spread out. In the silence of the hangar, Sarah heard it, the distant whine of a small aircraft engine warming up. Somewhere deeper in the structure, beyond a wall of hanging canvas tarps, someone was preparing to fly. They pushed through the tarps and emerged onto a clear section of concrete that opened directly onto an airport runway. A small private jet sat there, engines running, boarding stairs extended. And standing at the base of those stairs, a pistol in his hand, was Deputy Director Marcus Holloway. He looked different than his official photos. Desperate, disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. When he saw the FBI team, something died behind his eyes, the last hope extinguished. "It's over, Marcus," Morrison called out. "There's nowhere left to run." Holloway's laugh was bitter. Over. It was over the moment Crawford sent his damn dog through that airport terminal. I knew then. Everything I'd built, everything I'd accomplished, destroyed by a retired K9 and his stubborn loyalty. "You destroyed yourself," Crawford said, stepping forward despite his injuries. "The moment you decided your position was worth more than your duty." Holloway's gun swung toward Crawford, and everything happened at once. Shepard launched himself forward with a speed that belied his age, his training overriding years of retirement. Max moved in perfect synchronization, the two dogs covering the distance in seconds. Morrison's tactical team opened fire, but Holloway had already dropped his weapon, his survival instincts finally overriding his desperation. He raised his hands as Shepard and Max surrounded him, their growls making clear that any movement would be a mistake. FBI agents swarmed in, securing Holloway with practiced efficiency. The deputy director offered no resistance, his gaze locked on Shepard with something like respect. "Hell of a dog," he said quietly as they cuffed him. "Crawford, you trained him well." "I didn't train him," Crawford replied, moving to his partner's side. "The Seattle PD did that. I just gave him a reason to keep working. Loyalty, purpose, the things you forgot existed." As they led Holloway away toward waiting federal vehicles, Sarah knelt beside both dogs, her hands running through their fur. "Good boys, both of you. Outstanding work." Max leaned into her touch, his tail wagging. Job complete, partner safe, case closed. Shepard sat beside Crawford, who'd lowered himself carefully to the concrete, his strength finally failing. The medics rushed over, but Crawford waved them off for a moment. He pulled Shepard close, pressing his forehead against the dog's, exactly as he had at the airport when he'd said goodbye. "I'm sorry, boy," Crawford whispered. "I'm so sorry I sent you away. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was put you through hell." Shepard licked his face, on tail wagging, completely unbothered by the separation, the fear, the chaos. His partner was safe. That was all that mattered. Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes. She looked at Max, her own faithful partner, and understood completely what Crawford was feeling. These dogs didn't care about the missions, the danger, the sacrifices. They cared about their humans, about the pack they'd sworn to protect. Morrison approached, his expression softer than Sarah had seen all day. "The U.S. attorney has everything she needs. Crawford's evidence, plus Holloway's contractors turning state's evidence, plus catching Holloway in the act of attempted flight. This case is airtight." He looked at Crawford. "You did good, Daniel. Better than good. You brought down a network that's been operating for years." "Shepard brought it down," Crawford corrected. "I just documented it. He's the one who made sure the evidence got to the right people." "Then Shepard's getting a commendation," Morrison said. "First retired K9 to break a federal smuggling case. That's going to make one hell of a ceremony." Over the next hours, the scene transformed into a controlled chaos of evidence collection and official proceedings. Crawford was finally evacuated to a secure hospital for proper treatment. Holloway and his contractors were processed and transferred to federal holding. The U.S. attorney arrived personally to thank Sarah for her role in the investigation. As the sun set over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Sarah found herself sitting on the tailgate of her K9 unit vehicle, Max beside her. Morrison approached with 2 cups of coffee, handing her one. "Hell of a day," he repeated his earlier assessment. "You said that already," Sarah replied, sipping the coffee gratefully. "It bears repeating." Morrison looked out over the airport in the distance, its lights beginning to glow as evening fell. "Holloway's network is finished. We've identified 17 officials across 4 agencies who were taking bribes. The evidence Crawford compiled is going to keep prosecutors busy for years." "What happens to Crawford?" Sarah asked. "Medical leave, then probably a desk assignment until he decides what he wants to do next. Undercover work takes a toll. After 18 months of living a lie, some agents never want to go back to the field." Morrison smiled slightly. "But at least he'll have Shepard. That dog's not going anywhere without him." As if summoned, the Belgian Shepard appeared from the FBI medical van where Crawford was being prepared for transport. The dog moved directly to Sarah, sitting beside Max, the 2 K9s now comfortable in each other's presence. "They're bonded," Morrison observed. "You're Max and Crawford's Shepard. Partner recognizes partner." "Dogs know," Sarah said simply. "They always know." A week later, Sarah stood in front of the FBI field office, wearing her dress uniform, Max beside her in his formal K9 vest. Crawford was there too, his arm in a sling but looking significantly healthier. Shepard sat at attention beside him, wearing a brand-new collar with a gleaming medal attached. The ceremony was brief but moving. The U.S. attorney presented Shepard with a civilian commendation for service in the apprehension of federal criminals. Media cameras captured the moment when Morrison pinned the medal to the dog's collar, when Shepard's tail wagged with simple pride. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Crawford approached Sarah. "Lieutenant Collins, I wanted to thank you for trusting Shepard, for following his instincts when everyone else would have just treated him like a panicked pet." "I'm K9, Sarah said simply. "We trust our partners, even the ones who aren't officially ours." She looked down at Max, who was engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with Shepard, both dogs sniffing each other and wagging tails in the universal language of canine friendship. "What's next for you?" Crawford asked. "Back to patrol, back to keeping Atlanta safe, one call at a time." Sarah smiled. "What about you?" Crawford looked at Shepard, then back at Sarah. Morrison offered me a position training new undercover agents. Desk work mostly, but important, and it means Shepard and I stay together. After everything, I'm not ready to say goodbye again. Neither is he, Sarah observed, watching how the dog stayed close to Crawford, his body language relaxed and content. He's been working his whole life, first as a narcotics dog, then as your cover. He deserves some peace. We both do, Crawford agreed. As they walked toward the parking area, their dogs fell into step together. Max and Shepard, professional partners from different backgrounds, but united by the same purpose. Protecting their humans, serving justice, being loyal to the last breath. Sarah thought about the moment in the airport when everything changed. A tearful goodbye that was actually a brilliant tactical maneuver. A dog who refused to leave his partner behind, who broke free and sounded the alarm. A suitcase full of evidence that would change dozens of lives. All because one retired K9 understood something humans often forgot. Loyalty isn't just about following orders. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when it means breaking the rules. Hey, Crawford called as they reached their vehicles. If you're ever in Seattle, look me up. Shepard and I will be teaching at the Regional Training Center. We'd love to show Max what Northwest K9 operations look like. Deal, Sarah said. And if you're ever back in Atlanta, Max and I will give you the grand tour. Just try to avoid any federal conspiracies this time. Crawford laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. I'll do my best. Sarah climbed into her unit, Max jumping in beside her. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she watched Crawford in her rearview mirror. He was kneeling beside Shepard, both of them backlit by the setting sun, reunited and at peace. Her radio crackled. Unit K97, we have a suspicious package reported at Lenox Square Mall, requesting K9 sweep. Sarah smiled and keyed the mic. Unit K97 responding. En route. Max's ears perked up, his attention instantly focused. Back to work, back to the mission. But as they drove toward their next call, Sarah reached over and scratched behind Max's ears. Good boy, she said softly. Best partner I ever had. Max's tail thumped against the seat, his answer clear. And somewhere across the city, she knew Shepard was probably saying the same thing to Crawford. Because at the end of every mission, every danger, every impossible situation, one truth remained. Dogs always come home, always find their way back, always protect what matters most. And maybe, Sarah thought as Atlanta's skyline glowed in the distance, that was the most important lesson of all. Loyalty wasn't complicated. It was simple, pure, unwavering. It was a dog at an airport, barking at a suitcase, refusing to give up. It was a partnership that not even conspiracies could destroy. It was the knowledge that somewhere out there, your partner had your back. Always. The end.